I'm sure that if you saw the title for my sermon this morning, Victorious but Not Unscarred, you might think, well, evidently the pastor has completed his IRS forms. And I did yesterday. Well, April 15th is an auspicious day, but it's not only income tax day. And by the way, you do have till tomorrow. It's also the day the Titanic sank. It hit the iceberg late last night and it sank this morning very early. It's also the day that President Lincoln was assassinated. Well, sometime back, a 71-year-old grandmother in California pleaded not guilty to armed robbery, saying that she had been driven insane by the Internal Revenue Service, which seems perfectly understandable to me. Someone said that the difference between death and taxes is that death doesn't get more complicated each year. Really, most public servants do truly serve the public well. Though sometimes we can all feel a bit of sympathy for the dying businessman who called his friend and said, "Joe, I want you to promise me that when I die, you'll have my remains cremated." "Okay," said his friend, "and what do you want me to do with the ashes?" The businessman said, "Just put them in an envelope and mail them to the IRS and write on the envelope, 'Now you have everything.'" Victorious, but not unscarred. Actually, we are dealing with things other than tax matters this morning. We are dealing with the appearance of Jesus to his disciples after Easter. A couple of years ago, the Reuters news service carried a story about a Russian teenager who survived a lightning strike so powerful that it vaporized the gold chain, the gold necklace, which was a cross around her neck. The lightning bolt hit this young woman on the top of her head and seared through her body into the ground. The necklace she had been wearing, the cross, was vaporized, atomized, leaving burns in the shape of a cross on her neck. Only a couple of links of the chain could even be found. A doctor at the local hospital who treated her said, "It's a miracle she survived." She did survive and is fine now, but the report concludes, she will have deep scars on her neck where the cross was for the rest of her life. Jesus, after his resurrection, also bore the scars of the cross. We read in John's Gospel, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Shalom, peace be with you." After he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. A few verses later we read, "Now Thomas was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe.'" A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Shalom, peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, and I loved this yesterday as I was reading the Greek, it's not just put out your finger, it's carry your finger here. Pharaoh, carry, bring your finger here, Jesus said to Thomas, and place it here in my hands. Bring, Pharaoh means to carry, bring your hand here and place it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing. The word Doubt, by the way, is not in the text. Perhaps do you understand that the word believe is pistis in Greek? P-I-S-T-I-S, pistis. Pistis means to trust something with your whole life. It's like the aerialists in a circus who trust their whole life to the rigging, because if the rigging broke, they would fall, and if there were no net, they would die. So pistis means to trust with your life. The word is don't be apistis, don't be against or not believing, but believing. Don't be unbelieving, but believing. That's what Jesus said. Thomas's response, my Lord and my God. Thomas experienced both Jesus' love and Jesus' scars. Notice, Jesus does not call Thomas out on the carpet and said, you bad, bad boy. No. He simply says, don't be unbelieving, but believing. To me, it is significant that though Christ had been resurrected from the dead, his body still bore the scars from his crucifixion, victorious but not unscarred. It's a reminder to me that no one achieves great things without sacrifice. We need to know about people like Dr. Eleanor Chestnut, who arrived in China in 1893 under the American Presbyterian Missions Board and built a hospital using her own money to buy the bricks and mortar. The need for her services was so great, she started performing surgery in her own bathroom until the building was completed. One operation involved the amputation of a common laborer's leg. Complications arose, and skin grafts were needed. A few days later, another doctor asked Dr. Chestnut why she was limping. Oh, it's nothing, she replied tersely. Finally, a nurse revealed that the skin graft for the patient, a coolie from the lowest of Chinese society, came from Dr. Chestnut's own leg, taken with only local anesthetic. Sadly, during the Boxer Rebellion of 1905, Dr. Chestnut and 4 other missionaries were killed by a mob that stormed the hospital. Eleanor Chestnut knew the dangers of serving in China, but her faith was strong, and her commitment to Christ and to the Chinese people was total. Today, the Christian community in China is the fastest growing body of Christians in the world. But it would not even be there if it were not for people like Eleanor Chestnut, who were willing to bear on their own bodies the scars of commitment, victorious but not unscarred. The scars that Christ bore remind us that no one achieves anything of lasting significance without getting some scars along the way. Those scars are also a reminder of how much Christ loves us. Many of you are aware of the American Sign Language. The sign for Jesus is you touch your center finger to the middle of your hand, of each hand, the symbol for Christ. That symbol is used often during services of worship for those who are deaf, as they remember Jesus and remember his scars. And as they do that, they remember. Victorious, but not unscarred.